Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. We bring you a different kind of content today, which I promise you will open your eyes and teach you many new things you didn't know and give you a different perspective on football ownership. As you know, quick caveat, we don't take sides in, out, shake it all about, whatever your opinion is on our ownership. But this is very much a educational piece on how fans can gain more authority and control of the football clubs they love collectively as a unit, if that's what you want to do. I think we can all agree as fans that having more connection with our club and more say in how our club is run is only something we'd all love to have. And to discuss it with me is the author of the brilliant Football, The People's Shame, and also Britain's Got Talent finalist, Micky P Kerr. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, and thanks for inviting me on, Jim.
Thanks for coming on, Micky. We'll have an open chat, but I'll pass it over to you to start. Do you want to tell us about why you wrote this book, the motivation for it? You're from Leeds, right? So you're a Leeds fan, but and what it's all about.
I started this book 2021, 4 years ago. It's been released last month, so it's a lot of work, this. And I decided to write it because I saw something that no one else saw, or felt like I did. The political journey of English football doesn't really register in our cultural consciousness. We don't know what's happened to English football. So I went about researching it, and then I had the idea of just doing the opposite to whatever that kind of economic rationale, that economic thinking is. And I've created a theory of how English football can be run as a collectively owned public service without any taxation to the British taxpayer. So this is an incredibly good opportunity. I'm really proud of the theory, and it's been a lot of work. You know, I got a publishing deal a couple of years ago, so I was lucky enough to work with loads of political experts, economic experts, a host of journalists who have been really, really kind in offering their services. Kieran Maguire, Price of Football.
Oh, yeah, know him.
Nick Harris as well. So there's been loads of journalists that have contributed. So what we've got is a grand theory, and it's about putting English fandom on the front foot and saying this, something really obvious that we never considered. We can take these. We can take it all, not just every football club, but broadcasting, shirt manufacturing, and we can sell our cultural heritage, our brand, English football, to the rest of the world without any middleman. All the billionaires go, and we run it together. I'll explain it sounds really ambitious, and it is, but I think that's what we need. And I think when you look at Britain, modern Britain, we don't really have many assets left in this country. We don't own anything anymore. So I actually think that culturally speaking, English football is a bit like a national resource, you know, and if we can own it and claim it, then we can make a lot of money off this. And we can democratize English football and put English fandom back where it belongs and turn football from the people's shame, as I've dubbed it, back towards the people's game, which you never hear that word, you never hear that phrase anymore, because I think we all know it isn't.
Yeah, and this is great because I feel like I've watched football change over the years, less so than others, but even in my time, it's become. I used to squabble over who are the best players. Now I'm squabbling over FFP, PSR, why that club can spend more money than my club. It's so unfair. Man City should have this many charges and be relegated. I want to argue about the footballers again. I want to argue about the intricacies of Tottenham Hotspur and why I fell in love. I didn't fall in love with Spurs because of our owners. I fell in love with Spurs because of Robbie Keane, because of Jermaine Defoe, because of Dimitar Berbatov, you know. But going back to how you introduced this, and I'll ask an ignorant question. This sounds more in line with the Bundesliga's model where fans have a say, but accept full control for the fans. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they do a model called 49-51. So fan ownership has got 51%, which is enough to outbid any private contractors or so basically, it's not worth investing too much in a German club because you can be outvoted by fans. But the Germans, so this does limit kind of private investment. There's not many billionaires going over to Germany and asserting themselves like they do here and running our football clubs for their own gain, whether that's sports washing or whether it's US private equity coming over, you know, as a kind of springboard into Europe. There's loads of different reasons why you would want to own an English football club, a top one. And this is something we should consider. There's a lot of good reasons to own our football clubs. But they don't see it in Germany because of 49-51. But it's interesting. They are fighting like mad to keep it. Because when you get democracy, it seems that people want to keep it. They are fighting like mad to kick out any kind of private interests. We see the same thing in Argentina as well. People who have got democratic models are fighting for it, because what's happened to English football could easily happen to other nations as well. They're kicking them out. So this is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. I think that once we get democracy of our clubs, we'll realise, wow, we were getting this completely wrong. So yeah, my model is a lot more, I don't want to say aggressive, but a lot more radical, I suppose. But I think we could. There's a new form of public ownership called a public commons partnership. So I'm going to talk about the nationalisation of English football, but it won't be the government that owns it, it'll be us. And I'm thinking of more of a 90-10 split. And I think we should also hand over 10% of rights while we're at it to foreign supporters. Because if we do that, we're going to draw them in and we're going to monetise it as well. Because if you pay £1 a month as a foreigner to own Spurs, just a small part of it, you think about the financial repercussions of that. Because you've got millions of fans worldwide.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and this could produce billions of pounds a year just in ownership models. So that's my plan.
That's really good to hear, because one of my deliberate objections I was going to throw in there was, what about all our huge fans in Seoul, Australia, Singapore, wherever? They are just as bigger fans, if not more sometimes. These guys flying over from all over the world to get a glimpse of a club I'm blessed to be able to drive a couple of hours to go and see. Like, they're so important to the club.
Yeah.
So your model would ensure they can have a piece of this pie. So how does this...
Absolutely.
How can we... Because my other objection to this, and you've answered it a bit there, you've teased me there, Micky, was I don't want the government, though, making all the decisions on my football club. I want the fans to make decisions, because people talk about an independent regulator. Well, if it's the government, it's not technically independent. There's always going to be ulterior motives for them to make money off the club somehow. How does this structure work then? Can you give us a bit more detail in it?
Yeah, I mean, we're approaching this conversation in a different angle to normal, but
take it however you want. You can take us through the story first.
Usually I talk about the history of the game. We can do that and how we got to where we are. Well, let's draw on it straight away, because if it's in your mind, it's in others as well. So basically, what you've got at the minute is billionaire ownership. And if the government comes in, all you're doing is transferring ownership rights from private billionaires over to government. And that wouldn't free us. It wouldn't to elected government. It's probably the lesser of two evils in some ways, but I don't think people trust governments. No. And my idea is a huge corporation. So basically, it's called a public common partnership. It will be, the state will have a tiny slice of it, this tiny slice of it, but mainly like 90% will be us. It'll be governed through a huge corporation. But I think what's interesting about the current situation in English football is that they're trying to regulate like morality into it. They try to, when something goes wrong, it's always reactive. It's never proactive thinking. They're never thinking forward. They're never thinking long term. It's a lot of short termism, like in the wider economy, and there's a lot of just reactive. They're trying to insert moral codes into the regulation. It won't work. What you've got to do is actually build the moral landscape, and then build the regulation around that. That's the way we should do it. But we will own football as a huge corporation. We will own every single football club. We'll own broadcasting, and we're going to come on to that because this is huge. We're about to go into the new era of broadcasting, the digital realm. And we're talking tens of billions of pounds here is up for grabs. And at the moment, a self-regulated, self-serving and self-elected Premier League, no one put these people in charge. They're about to take a digital model, broadcasting, just like Amazon do. The technology's there to now stream digitally for football's broadcasting. They're going to take that model and do it to 188 countries worldwide. 200 million people already pay to watch Premier League football. £10 a month, £24 billion a year. And when you think about it, just one single source, people can't hack it as much. When Spurs play Arsenal, that 200 million goes up to around 500 to 600 million. That's our customer base. Imagine that company owned by us.
Yeah.
So what I've recommended is we write a football constitution. How do you think football should be governed? Our corporation, which is an amalgamation of businesses across various sectors. How about a public gambling company? So obvious. I mean, we already have one. It's called the National Lottery. It creates millions of pounds. So we could... there'd be no advertising in English football, by the way. You wouldn't need to advertise. There'd be no debt. We're running a public service. Everything is reversed. We have got billions of pounds. I'm suggesting in my book, we put about 11 billion, 12 billion back into football. And then we use another 10, 20, 30 billion, whatever it might be, to reinvest back into British society. Some of it as well will go into the countries that pay. Like you've got a great relationship with, South Korea with Son? So that will be amazing. You'll be investing in South Korea and you'll be making sure that, tens of millions of South Koreans are invested in your club, even when Son goes. There could be a special relationship being built there. If we gain ownership of our clubs, there's so many incredible business and cultural opportunities for us as well. All this is politically possible. But we might go into the mechanisms of how we're going to do this politically later, but that's my idea. A huge corporation owned by paying members, us, with a written constitution of how football should be governed. So it's a framework for elected officials to follow and something to measure them by as well. We've got to decide how we want English football to be governed, what the rules are going to be. And I think that it's a good opportunity now if you want to talk about the Victorian regulation, because everything you described before, Jim, that's where it came from.
Yeah, because you were going to touch on the history. I am interested to kind of hear a bit about that. So my understanding is, having listened to pieces of your book before, is this really changed when Britain went into a phase of privatisation, and we won't go into specifics of the politics because we don't do that. But that was a shifting moment, right? Do you want to take us through that journey of what happened?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know we're like 12 minutes into this, and I know it's a lot of information. So this concept is completely different to anything you've ever thought about before. And I'm obviously addressing the listener here, but so I'm trying to work out how best to. I'm still trying to work out how best to teach this, because it's such a radical shift. But it's to see where we are now. We've got to go back and understand the history of English football, which is an incredible history. It really is. It was first professionalised in 1885. And it was done so because there was a huge movement from below. The rich controlled football, just like now. The rich controlled football. Football was standardised through the public schools in the 1850s, 60s. It went along with the railways. When the railways expanded, you had this problem. You had people from different parts of the country playing each other with different rules. So that led to the standardisation of football, railways. And then 1860s, you saw the FA was formed, 63. And then by the 1880s, it's becoming increasingly popular. And the rich people didn't want football to be professionalised because football was an amateur pursuit. Only rich people could afford to do it. They didn't want their game to be taken by commoners. But football was becoming so popular, and basically they were paying players through expenses, a loophole. And eventually, loads of northern clubs were banned. You had this north-south divide. We saw it in rugby as well. But thankfully, football survived intact. All they did, and this is what I know we should do, all they did was they threatened the FA to set up a different football federation. The FA relented immediately and they professionalised football. By threatening the status quo, they give you what you want because they don't want to lose power. Nobody is threatening the Premier League or the FA in terms of power structures. That's what I'm suggesting we do. We develop a new way of governing English football and we attack through politics. We have to build a political movement. It's been done once before in the 80s. We are going to do it again in the 2020s. This is basically history repeating itself. But the Victorians were really, they let free market economics dominate for a bit, and then they realised something. Football is a sport. Primarily, it's not a business. Football is a sport. And what does that mean? You've got sporting integrity, fair competition, equality, and community as well. So they protected this. The Victorian message is really clear. Football is foremost a sport, and its business is to be strictly regulated. So what did the Victorians do? In 1992, they created Rule 34. Have you ever heard of Rule 34, Jim?
Only from listening.
Okay, yeah.
But I'll let you explain.
So David Conn's a great journalist on this. He's done a lot of good work with Rule 34. Rule 34 meant you couldn't asset strip a football club. It was basically meant that shareholders couldn't take out dividends. You weren't allowed to pay yourself. So basically it meant that football clubs were community assets.
You couldn't make money off a football club, basically.
You could not make money off football clubs. If a football club was liquidated, all the money went to charity. So this is strict regulation to protect football clubs from private profiteers, basically, rich people who would come in and control and dominate. So that's what the Victorians did first of all. Rule 34 is no longer adhered to, and Spurs play a key role in this. We'll come to that in a second. What else did the Victorians do? 1901, wage cap. You've got the same teams winning. You've got monopolisation. They put a wage cap on. All gate receipts were shared between clubs. So when a small team went to a big team, the gate receipts were shared. So this is how they did it. You've got a wage cap, sharing of gate receipts, and strict regulation that controls how football clubs are run and managed in the interests of people, not, individual. All this lasts generations. It lasts up until the key decade is actually the 1970s. So what you've got in 1970 in the wider political landscape, is in 1970, oil is cheap and unemployment's low. By 1980, that's reversed. Unemployment is high. Oil is really expensive. You had a Middle Eastern crisis that meant oil in the mid-70s went really expensive. And as a result, Britain, it just collapsed financially. It was this old Keynesian post-war economic consensus was gone, and in comes neoliberalism in its place. So you see this shift in the late from one economic theory to another, and this affects football. Football mirrors the wider world perfectly. It always has. And you see this. What is neoliberalism? It's basically a process of deregulation, privatization, and the use of free market economics.
Yeah.
So what you begin to see is deregulation. The wage cap, by the way, went in the 60s. Okay, so it's setting everything up. You had, it was absurdly low. You were getting £20 a week.
I didn't even know there was a wage cap, and that's because I was born in the 90s, right? But
yeah,
it's amazing that it wasn't actually that long ago we had a wage
cap.
No,
not really. And it was. We could talk about the monopolisation later and how the wage cap affects it. But you had Jimmy Hill, and it was rightfully challenged. It was so absurd. I think it was £20 a week players were getting paid, capped at. Then you've got players like George Best coming through. He was the first to earn £1,000 a week. Trevor Francis in the late 70s was £1 million transfer. So you've got money coming into the industry. But the key year in English football, after this economic switch from collectivism to individualism, from Keynes to neoliberalism, the businessmen are starting to look at football because it's actually advancements in technology that change things. It's the broadcasting. Broadcasting first came into English football regularly, weekly, in the 1983-84 season. You've got a duopoly, Spurs. You've got ITV and the BBC. They're pumping money into the industry. Rich people are seeing this. Whoa, we want some of that. 1983 is the key year because it's the first time Rule 34 was bypassed. Rule 34 has never been rescinded. It's never been rescinded. It was in the FA handbook until the late 1990s. It's just been forgotten about. It was bypassed. Some older listeners might know a name or recognise the name Irving Scholar.
Yeah.
So Irving Scholar was the chairman of Spurs before Sugar. He handed it over to Sugar in 85, and Sugar continued his kind of like commercialization plan. Irving Scholar was the first to do it. So Spurs play a key role in the history of English football's political journey, a journey which exists under a cloak of invisibility, by the way, as it stands. Scholar wrote to the FA. He said, I want to bypass Rule 34. The FA didn't respond, so he went ahead with the commercialization plan. So how do you take money out of football clubs with Rule 34? This is what Scholar did, quite clever. He set up a holding company tethered to the parent company, which is Spurs. And then he transferred funds from the parent company into the holding company. So the funds hadn't left the club, but guess who owns the holding company? So Scholar was able to get money out there. It's like a back door, really. So this changed everything. No one really knew this was a material change. It all went on behind closed doors. Irving Scholar's holding company model became the new norm, and that's what we see in 1983 as well. We see this shift in the landscape. Remember that bit of regulation that we had with the Victorians about gate receipts being shared?
Yeah.
1983 is the year they stopped being shared. So we
see
this.
That? I didn't realise it was late as that. Wow.
We see this kind of individualism coming into football now. It's like it's all about us. We don't care about anyone else. We're trying to get a foothold here and gain an advantage. And that shift plays out obviously throughout the 80s. English football kind of goes on decline because of hooliganism. They've got the Heysel disaster. We get banned from Europe. Prior to that, English football clubs were smashing it in Europe. We were champions of Europe for 6 years running, I think.
Yeah,
7 to
Spurs
83.
won 2 European trophies, and
That's right. Yeah, and but 1989 changes everything. That's the Hillsborough disaster. You've got this huge report that comes in afterwards, the Taylor report. It says, we've got to change things here. So the Labour opposition wanted to fund this transition to all-seater stadiums, which is what the report recommended. Through the pools, or older listeners will remember the pools, football pools, it was a form of gambling, really successful form of gambling, made a lot of money. The pools was bringing in about 250 million a year, something like that. But the Conservative government in power said no, football clubs are they pushed football deeper into the private sphere. They went, no, football clubs are going to fund this themselves, and they'll do it through negotiating new broadcasting contracts. In 1988, ITV had got, I think it was about 48 million had gone into the game, last 4-year contract. So the money's coming in, advances in technology, broadcasting, better pitches as well. Football was a quagmire mudbath, English football, but it comes from golf, about US golf pitches, the drainage systems. So you've got this advancement in technology, you've got better pitches, and you've got this perfect storm, really, where you've got the switch. Capitalism is on the up. You've got the communist defeat in 91, 92, and then you've got this new era, the dawn of a new economic era. So the Champions League rebrand, the Premier League rebrand.
Yeah,
it's not a coincidence. The year's 1992. Murdoch is given political favours, so it's huge. This, I mean, people, older listeners, you might not remember. Jim, it's 1992. I'm born in 1981. I can still remember the 1992 general election. Neil Kinnock was going to win it for Labour, but John Major made a surprise victory. It was helped by Murdoch, because Kinnock was going to take Murdoch to the Monopolies Commission, because you're not allowed to do one single source Premier League. You're just not allowed it. So the Monopolies Commission is like 1965 Monopolies Act. So he threw his weight behind the Conservatives, who gave him political protection. So this is the whole economic and political landscape coming together to form the Premier League. And since then, more and more money has been pushed to the top. Spurs were part of the breakaway 5. It was who decided to do this with Murdoch. It was Spurs, Everton, Arsenal, Man United, and Liverpool. They were the 5 teams that pushed for it, the bigger teams wanting more for themselves with this new era of English football, broadcasting, Sky, satellite TV. And ever since then, the story's played out as it has.
And I guess you could argue that from a business perspective, you're looking at football as a business, not as a sport. The Premier League smashed it, and these owners have smashed it. They've made really smart decisions. They've kind of thought ahead of other leagues, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think anyone quite expected it to boom as much as it has to the level. So we're going, actually, do we still have a voice? Do I actually still have an influence on my club? Wait a second. I can't physically stop that 10% ticket rise every single season. Oh shit, suddenly the guy I used to sit next to can't afford his renewal. What's going on? And no one cares. You know what I mean? And then we find ourselves defending the concept because we want our club to have more money to spend every season. We want the best players and we want the best stuff. And then comes sports washing. And then it's like, I'm just tired of arguing about owners and arguing about types of owners and arguing about how much money we should spend, how much money can spend. I think we could all agree that you put the politics to one side. This is about giving fans control and an opportunity to look at things differently, rather than putting banners up about, I want this rich person over this rich person, or I don't want that. Why not have a movement together where all the clubs work together to say, why don't all us fans cobble in here with our voices and get control for all of us back? We're not handing it off to the government. We own it. Like, we as fans. Is that
that's exactly right. That's exactly what I've theorised. And I think that the wider political landscape is coming together to allow for a new idea. It's fertile ground for revolution. Because, like I said, the wider political landscape and football are interlinked. They mirror each other. But everything you just described there, it happens incrementally. It happens slowly. So you don't realise. It's like when you watch your child grow. You don't notice them growing. But if you don't see someone else's child for a couple of years, they'll just shot up. So the situation is changing all the time, but just slowly. But eventually the goalposts have shifted inch by inch, and we're looking at a completely different landscape now. And like you said, we've been completely frozen out. But there's a huge opportunity here. And whatever the Premier League have done, whether it be good or bad, It is what it is. And English football is now a global brand. Our clubs are revered. They are, supported by millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people across the globe. And it's possible to ring fence the football sector. People can't imagine this, but it's really possible. Ring fence the football sector. It's a tiny, tiny part of our economy. It's not very big economically.
No, they're not
Culturally,
yeah.
It's massive culturally. But we could start talking about this now, because how we govern English football is up to us. That's what I'm saying. We can come together and discuss it and agree on some fundamental constitution, some rules. I'll suggest some later, but this makes sense. We're just talking about rational thinking here. That's all we're doing, because the way that it's governed now is so irrational. Saudi Arabia own Newcastle United. It's just ridiculous saying it. Middle Eastern football has already been nationalised. It's just not our country that's acted. But get this, you can buy every single football club in England for somewhere between 25 and 30 billion. Track and trace costs 37 billion. People using the underground in London know about the Elizabeth line, 22 billion. At state level, this is not a lot of money. Think about the broadcasting. And by the way, through a political intervention, I'm talking about acts of parliament. This is what it requires. We have to build the movement and create political pressure. Through acts of parliament, you can just dismiss them. You don't even need to have their permission. Brexit, I don't want to, now I know that this is a hot potato. Brexit is advantageous here. This is a Brexit benefit. Inside the EU, people like Levy or whoever owns Spurs, it's a British ownership, isn't it, Spurs?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. These people who own our clubs would go to the European courts. It would be a really messy, drawn-out affair, because you're not allowed to do it. Inside the EU, they've got the anti-liberalisation laws, which advocates for free market principles. You can't get state monopolies. Outside the EU, they can't argue. The only thing they've got is the human rights, 1998. So what does that say? It says the state has the right to take not just property but businesses if it wants to, if it's in the public interest. All you've got to do is do it according to the law, acts of parliament, and you've got to compensate them. We've got to pay top-end market value. So for £30 billion, we can waltz in through government, through politics, take every single club and take the broadcasting for free. All you've got to do is wait to the end of a contract cycle. We take over what they're going to build, which is a single digital platform that, streams English football to the rest of the world. We take that, and it's going to be producing somewhere between, it's hard to get the figures because 200 million people already pay, but more will be paying if it's cheaper. But, somewhere between 30 billion. There's no doubt annually that's what we'll be paying, we're making. That will pay back the cost of our clubs in 1 year. You can do this inside an election cycle. By the 4th year, we'll have paid the government back twice-fold if we want. We'll have complete ownership of every single club and a international broadcasting service that is collectively owned as an organisation. I'm talking about not government control, I'm talking about a corporation. It's just owned by us. There's already similar things going on. Mondragon in the Basque region of Spain, one of the biggest kind of industrial sectors in the Spanish economy. This is how this model is based upon. It's owned by the people who work there. It's across various sectors. CEO pay is limited to 5 times the amount of the normal workers. So that's how this model of ownership is already it's already in existence. This is an incredible opportunity for us here. We can completely transform the political and economic landscape of English football. It's not that difficult to do. The oil industry, the US private equity that own this country, football is a great opportunity to take them on.
So, and I appreciate this is something you've talked about with much more intelligent people than me, like Kieran Maguire, whose book's there, by the way, it's a great book, and others you mentioned. So you've probably explored some of these questions already, but excuse me if you haven't. So how does it work if, let's just say, Spurs want to sign, I'm just going to say Mbappe, it never happened. Spurs want to sign Mbappe, but Man City want to sign Mbappe. Do different clubs get different amounts of share of this? Is it everyone now on an equal transfer fee model and wages cap model? How does all that kind of work as well?
Okay, first of all, we could keep it as it is. We don't have to implement a wage cap. We can just keep the economic system as it is. What you will get is hyper wage inflation because we're going to pump more money into football. Clubs will be owned by their members, but they'll also have their own commercial operations going on. Everything that Spurs does internationally will be Spurs money. So the bigger clubs are going to make more money because they'll have more international members.
Yeah.
Actually, the kind of monopolization we see, and I can talk about monopolization in a bit if you want because it's incredible, but that will probably accelerate, in my opinion. So this is what I've suggested: we do a wage cap. At the minute, wages are around 4 billion in the Premier League. I've said we up them to 5.5 billion, and that means 200 million pounds, basically there or thereabouts per team, plus 75 million for transfers. However, and this is from the Americans, it's interesting how people turn around and say, this is communism. All the regulations I've imported from the US because this isn't the wider economy. This is sport. The Victorians did the same thing. This is not the wider economy. We are ring-fencing sport and trialling a sporting system. So you get a wage cap, but you might remember David Beckham going to LA Galaxy in 2006-07.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to fund his wages, they had to create a new piece of legislation because the MLS have got a wage cap. It's called the designated player rule. So you can sign 3 players outside the wage cap. It's a fluid concept. It could be 2 players, it could be 5. So if Spurs want to sign Mbappe, absolutely. You can sign 4, 5, whatever players outside the wage cap. That gives Spurs, Liverpool, the Manchester clubs, the Arsenal, Chelsea, whoever might be the top 6, whatever, it gives them a slight advantage, but not one that would make them win the league every year.
Yeah,
so this is a tightrope to walk. How do you create a fairer competition with more money? You've got to regulate.
Because that's it. It's about maintaining as a Premier League fan, I want to maintain our dominance financially over other leagues, but also within our domestic league, see more equal opportunity across the teams that within our domestic league. So we are a dominant league together, but you see more irregular winners. So I don't want to see Man City win 8 of 12 Premier League titles.
Yeah.
I want to see them win 2 or 3 of them and have a shot at winning 1 or 2 myself rather than being blocked out of it as a Spurs fan, as an example.
I think it'd be great if we saw like a Leicester every 10 years, if we saw like the odd team winning it that you just wouldn't expect, and then you get maybe a couple or 2 or 3 years at the top, and then you fade again, and to have that and also be competitive in Europe as well would be brilliant. And also like for teams like Millwall who've never made it to top tier, could you get like a Nottingham Forest that goes from the second division like in the late 70s into the first division, then wins the European Cup? That's the dream. There's a way of doing this as well, being clever with the regulation. Let's just say, in terms of you can only have 35 players in your squad, maximum.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say as well that you have to play 2 players on the pitch under the age of 22 that were born in certain hospitals. Suddenly, you've got to play local, lads. Suddenly, you've got to look inwards. And you can't just buy from outside. If you don't develop world-class or brilliant academy players, you don't do well. So just by switching our thinking like that, it means that however much money you've got, you can't necessarily buy success. And if one of those players is taken off, they have to be replaced by another that meets the criteria. Born in certain hospitals or lived in your area for a certain amount of time, whatever it might be, you've got to play academy players. So you strengthen the ties between academy and first team, which I think everybody wants. We want to see the local lads do well. For a Leeds fan, it's gutting to see Archie Gray move over to Spurs at 18. 18. And, this is part of the Gray dynasty. Eddie Gray is the greatest player that's ever played in Leeds. It's his grandson. We've lost that heritage. The big teams come calling, and there's the upward mobility of all the world's best players and coaches just going up. The thing about Spurs is you're not at the top. Gareth Bale doesn't stay at Spurs. He goes to Madrid.
Well, this is what I say to fellow fans is because we built the stadium, we've got this amazing ability now to navigate FFP and PSR more than we did, but we're still 6th in terms of revenue. We've gotten a richer 6th, but we're still falling faster behind Man City than they'll grow quicker than we can because they've got a state behind them. And so we're not going to catch that. So in a weird way, I know it feels weird saying the teams on the bottom 6 will get close to us. Yeah, but we'll get closer to the teams in the top 4 or 5. And overall, your chances are probably higher of winning a trophy. you probably, if you had that model over 20 years, you probably would see Spurs win 2 or 3 trophies, not none.
Absolutely. Same in Newcastle. By turning around and saying, listen, you've got to play, it could be 3 players, it could be 3 academy players. There's different ways of doing this, but by fusing together like quality international players with homegrown lads, I think we'll see a better Premier League, more competitive football. And I think we actually have to lessen the standard slightly. I think we have to hollow out our league. Let's keep the best players. But those the bracket of 30 million to 60 million players, let's give some to other leagues. It's ridiculous when you go in to Europe and to basically, if we don't make the quarterfinals, you've underperformed. But on the other side of the coin, getting to the quarterfinals of the European Cup should be a real achievement. But it's not, because our wage bills are so much higher than the rest of the world. So It's about us taking pride in ourselves and being, I suppose, less selfish and more honourable and having more integrity and saying to the rest of the world, listen, the English are going to take their game back. They're going to go back to fair competition of the founding fathers, what they wanted football to be, and they're going to give away some of these really good players. They're going to lessen the squads. They're going to go rely more on academies. But yeah, those Haalands and those Sons, they're still going to be playing. So, actually, it opens up space for individualism here, because you want to see those world-class players doing their world-class things. When you lessen the standard, you will get that.
But you make the league richer, so the clubs can spend more on wages, so they can still dominate in terms of having the top 1% of elite players. But by adding in some regulation that says play more academy kids, you force them to invest some of that money not into a quick, easy option of 60 million quid on Richarlison. You say, why don't you spend that 60 million pounds bringing a new grassroots, place in North London to try and build the next Richarlison yourself through your academy rather than buying it, and then
absolutely. And it's not just players; it's coaches. The Premier League, for us, everything they've done a lot of good things, with the commercialization of the product, but they've failed us on so many levels. And the FA have been useless. You look at Spain; they've got a real culture of coaching. We haven't. It costs money to become a coach. It's quite hard. What we should be doing is pumping billions of pounds a year into all academies across the country and a new culture of coaching, and saying, listen, we're going to become the best team in the world by a distance, because we're going to have 3 first teams here in the England team that could beat anybody. And the way we do that is pumping, and I'm talking billions, every year, creating loads of jobs, a new English footballing culture where we are head and shoulders above the rest of the world. Because it's our own boys, and our own girls as well in the women's game. We develop them. There's a lot of players that just fall, academy players that don't make it. I think 1% of the academy players make it as a professional, because there's in the socio-economic deprived areas, I bet there's a hell of a lot in London. I know there is. You've got real talent going to waste, getting caught up in gangs or whatever. We need to make sure these boys have got a route into football, good education, they're looked after, they're fed well, and we need to get them in on that pitch doing what they can do in a new sporting culture that says it's more about just money. You're fighting for, if you have players, my vision is this: in 20 years' time, you've got some world-class players coming through in the 3rd tier, and they don't want to leave. But the fans want to sell them. Do you know why? Because if you sell them for £100 million, you get the money. Player sales count for your money.
Yeah.
So imagine selling a player and you get to decide on what. This is the model we can have. If we have full ownership of our clubs and a well-controlled footballing economic landscape where profits go to us, it's all about balancing this with also what are other teams doing across other countries doing across the world. And then you start looking at UEFA and FIFA. There should be a wage cap right across the world, so football can be more competitive. But it's a system of brown envelopes, so
you can't have an independent overarching body really for football like UEFA or anyone like that, because it's always going to have someone unelected at the top who eventually someone will get that position who isn't going to be morally squeaky clean, and there is going to start, things just happen like that. And I think the only way you can ever know a club's decisions are always, being made with the best interest of fans is if the decisions are being made by the fans. And
that's why I think constitutions are important. I think we've got to start asking other fan bases across the world, what do you want? How do you think football should be governed? This is a sport, not a business. And at the minute, you've just got a couple of leagues where all the best players in the world are concentrated. It never used to be like that. And I don't think football was diminished when more great players were spread across the globe. It kind of makes it more exciting in a lot of ways. So this is a debate. This is the book is a platform for a new debate, a new way of looking at football, and we've got to start having those conversations. But for me, you mentioned it earlier, ownership is key here. We have the political opportunity to take our football clubs, and I think that in the wider economic landscape, we've got oligarchy happening more and more. Billionaires are gaining more and more control over Britain, over the world, really, and we have a chance to take them on in a really narrow impasse. This is what's always happened in previous political fights and actual battles. If you have a stronger enemy, you take them on where you can't be outflanked in a narrow impasse. And that impasse is football. We can take these.
Well, this has been so good to listen to because, yeah, like I said at the start, a lot of people want something new. They want something different. That the things that get banded around a lot amongst our fan base in particular at Spurs is, you'll see banners, profit before glory, all those things. And a lot of us find ourselves in the middle of this just saying, I don't want to take sides. I don't think just switching the guy at the top is going to fix anything. They've done good things, they've done bad things, and people squabble over all the intricacies. But we all know the common things are we want fans to have easier access to the game, more control over decisions that are made of the football club they support, to be protected from being pushed out of their football club any further. So rather than, maybe being part of those fragmented arguments on the side, maybe consider being a part of something bigger like this, looking over your shoulder to your mates who support other football clubs and saying, why don't we discuss this idea together where we all get a benefit? We're not talking about, like you said, making this some state thing where there's no money in football. We're trying to make the Premier League richer, get the best players in the world, be a part of your club, be a shareholder of your club, band together with people all around the world in this, and feel that sense of unity of your community. And one more thing though, Micky, I do want to say, Archie Gray, future England captain for you?
Oh, it's difficult to say, but yeah, he's got that. He's got that pedigree. He played at right back for us, and it wasn't really his position because through the academy he was a 10. But some of the goals he was scoring, you're like, wow, this guy's an attacking threat. But since he's come into the professional game, he's been a defensive kind of player. But I mean, he's doing great for you at centre back. It's not his position. I mean, physically, I don't know how he's coping. And because he's not a centre back build, is he? Yeah, he's a real quality player on the ball, and I think you've seen that.
We love him.
Yeah, I don't know what his position is. Is he a DM?
Well, he's playing left wing back at the moment because with so many injuries. He's played right wing back, left wing back, centre back, central midfield.
Yeah.
He is in just when you see another academy player come through, and we've got some really good ones, he is like another level. You're like,
oh wow,
how are you so good at 18?
I'm really pleased for him.
He's class.
You want to see him do well. Every Leeds fan does because he's part of our heritage. And I'm glad. I watch Spurs now with an added interest because I want to see him do well. And I'm like, of course I do. And that's what football's about. It's about togetherness. It's about community. It's about family, and it's about loyalty. And I think we've got to be loyal to each other. When you lift up the veil, we all support the same team here.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got to think about. I mean, we're not at the minute. This is the embryonic stage. The Football the People's Shame came out in December. We're in January now, or early February, whenever you're watching this. We're talking. I'm getting together with Man United radicals, 1958. There's some Hammers fans as well. The Spirit of Shankly up in Liverpool, or through the Man City fans, 1894. People from that movement. There's a real want for fans to come together. We're starting to realise now it's up to us. No one's coming to save us. We've got to take these on ourselves. And the movement is going to. We're thinking of maybe Easter. Maybe we get something on this. I'm thinking of some of the Football Heritage Union, something like that. A movement you can sign up to, a website, a place you can go and figure out what others are doing, and also a place to debate how do we take them on? How do we grow this movement? Football's a really interconnected network. So actually, I think theoretically, although we're very passive, football fans have been so passive over the years. Politically, I'm talking. We've taken everything lying down, and I think we've been gaslit to the extent where we don't even know how to fight back.
Well,
and I'm a very radical, and I'm up for this. I want to take it all.
Yeah. Well, we're easily won over, aren't we? Like
I hope so.
I was fuming 2 days ago at how we're doing in a transfer window, and then suddenly Tottenham might get blah blah from this club. Like, new shiny thing. I'm so excited. I'm all happy again. Like, we're very fickle as football fans.
Yeah, we are. I'm the same though. You know, I'm not trying to take away from the short-termism of football. We need that. What I'm offering everybody listening is added to your short-term vision is a new long-term vision where we fight a fight over the years, over the decades if we have to. But, you know, this could be done in 2029. And I want to say thanks for listening, because I know we've come to the end, and I know this is a lot of information because and it's a lot to take on. It's a completely new concept, but I hope that you can engage with it. And the book is called Football, the People's Shame. It's on Audible, which is great because people have got no time these days.
Yeah.
So you can listen to it through Audible. And thanks for having me on, mate. And hopefully speak to you again sometime and
yeah, absolutely.
catch up.
This has been great, and it's been a different take on change. And it's one that I find is easier to get behind because it's not about picking sides. It's about all being one collective group as a football fan and football supporters to get something that benefits all of us fans together. If you're sick of all those toxic debates about in, out, or whatever, why not consider this? Check out the book, like Micky said, on Audible, or you can get it on Amazon. Football, the People's Shame. And make sure you check out Micky's Britain's Got Talent performance as well.
Don't check out the final. That final was really bad. It's one of the worst performances you've ever seen. It's like Ange Postecoglou on speed. Mind you, I quite like Ange. He plays attacking football. He reminds me of Bielsa.
Yeah.
But I can imagine the frustrations at Spurs at the minute because you're not going to get relegated. We didn't talk about monopolisation. You're not going to get relegated. The teams that come up go down.
Yeah.
Leeds will be relegated next year if we go up. You'll be all right. And you just got to cut your losses this season, I think, haven't you? At least you've got Archie Gray.
Yeah, and most of us are still behind Ange. We're more actually on this topic saying we should be seeing more of what we investors, fans, being put into players to help him in the transfer window. I'm trying to put that as politically as I can. I should just say spend more money.
Yeah.
Maybe if we were following this movement, we would be able to go and choose who we want to go and boost ourselves up.
And you'd have more money anyway.
You'd have more money, yeah. There you go. Well, thank you so much, Micky. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.